So we are running Metal Gear Solid 3 HD edition on the Xbox 360, and I am running this on the March 8th, 2023 version of Xenia-Canary. All of the details can be found here. They can be found in the description of the video, and all that. I'm streaming this live on Twitch right now, so hello to everyone who's out there. But also, obviously, this is on YouTube if you're watching the VOD now. Xenia-Canary is open. It's down there. You can see the frame rate. Now, for the most part, Xenia-Canary is using the default settings, but there are a couple of settings that I've changed, mainly to do with VSync and stuff, so that Xenia is controlling its own frame rate. I've also disabled achievements, because achievements come up in their own overlay over the top of the game. And in particular, if you're using a frame rate limiter, or if you're just doing a frame rate capture like I'm doing, it then ignores the background game and focuses on the overlay. So I've disabled achievements. I do have Xenia controlling its own frame rate. It is limited. It'll be around 59 for the most part because of how the calculation works. But yeah, let's get into it. I will be, let me go full screen with this. Wonderful. I am actually playing this with a DualShock 5 or a DualSense controller, only because it's just preferable for me at the moment. But it should all work great anyway. I'm not using turbo or anything like that for this. Just normal stuff. All right, so I am going to speedrun this. I'm going to be skipping through cutscenes and stuff like that. First thing you will notice is this opening animation doesn't always work. That's something I've noticed with Xenia a couple of times. I wouldn't worry too much about it. It just doesn't like to play very well. I've got a slight black border at the top of my screen, so I'm just gonna, it hasn't not quite in the right place, so I'm just gonna fix that. There we go. That should look perfect. Wonderful. All right. I can load it. First thing you will, that's working correctly. Should have sound. First thing you will notice with the sound, there is a slight delay between the action on screen and the sound. If I move up the menu, you'll hear that the sound was slightly delayed after it. That is not a problem with Metal Gear Solid 3. It's not a problem with my computer. It is a problem with Xenia. It's always been there. Whatever game you play on Xenia, the sound is always slightly delayed. It's something they've never been able to fix. So we have to deal with that going forwards. So let's play. So Xenia is controlling its own frame rates. Basically, VSync is enabled, and then there is a setting to determine how many frames are played during VSync. And that's about it. I'm then using RivaTuner statistics server to overlay the current frame rate over the top of the game. And as I say, because of the way the maths works, it's not perfectly 60 FPS at all times. It will jump between 59 and 60, which for the purposes of speedrunning is absolutely fine. You can only affect the number of frames by a single amount. I think it's something like 16 or 17 frames per millisecond. I can't remember exactly what the calculation is, but basically, if I go up one, then we go up to like 78 frames per second, and if I go down one, then then it ends up as something like 48 frames per second, which is obviously no good. Basically, for speedrunning purposes, as long as the frame rate never goes over 60. It's all right. It's all right if it fluctuates over 60, like, you know, very, very occasionally, like during loading screens and stuff like that. But as long as it's not like consistently over 60, and it shouldn't do. It should, for the most part, apart from like you know, cutscenes and loading truck times and stuff like that, it should stay at 59 to 60 throughout, unless of course there's any issues. Now, this isn't the first time that I have ran this recently. I did a run of this not too long ago. However, I did save a video of it, but I didn't upload it because I had not been able to figure out the settings for Xenia itself to control the frame rate. I was controlling the frame rate using RivaTuner, because not only will RivaTuner display your current frame rate over the top of the display, it will also allow you to limit it. That's why I do use RivaTuner for limiting games such as Klonoa 2, and you can use it for other stuff as well. But the problem with that was, and this is the other reason I've disabled achievements, is that whenever I got an achievement, the game's frame rate would get ignored. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just run past that guard. We might not get it. They might get a long loading screen here. Oh, no, I didn't. Cool. Maybe that's only a problem with the Xbox and not a problem with them. On the if I was playing this on an Xbox Series S, which is how I usually play Snake Eater, that going into that transition, because I was going from an evasion / caution down into nothing, we would have gotten a long loading screen, but that didn't happen, so that's good. So yeah, I did the previous run, but every time I got an achievement and the overlay for the achievement came up on screen, the background gameplay would be completely ignored by the FPS limiter, and would just absolutely shoot up. You know, it would just run at a ridiculous pace. And I don't know if that's the reason why it caused another problem. But the other problem I had is at the end of the run, when it came to the score screen, and this was very important for one of the reasons that I'm doing this, is to see what the viability of using this emulator for speedrunning is, because as you may know, Metal Gear Solid 3 is extremely inaccessible. It is the only way to purchase the game currently is to purchase a second-hand physical copy. Either the PlayStation, any of the various PlayStation 2 versions, the PS3 version, or the Xbox 360 version. Of course, if you buy the Xbox 360 version, you either need to play it on an Xbox 360, which has some issues. You can play it on an Xbox One, which isn't overly fantastic, but will run slightly better. Or you can play it on an Xbox Series X. You can't play a disc version on the Xbox Series S like I have, because there is no disc slot in an Xbox Series. And the Xbox Series S is a download console only. It has no disc slot. So unless you already own the digital version, which luckily I did, because I just decided to buy it because it was on sale at one point, you have to have a physical disc. But the HD edition, the PS2 edition, is not available in any digital format anyway. It was never sold digitally. And the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions of the HD edition, which is what I'm playing here, the 360 version, is currently not available for purchase on digital stores because Konami had issues with the licensing of real-life footage that's used in this and Metal Gear Solid 2, and therefore took them down. This is something that's been going on for about a year and a half, and the only update we've had from Konami is they're working on it. They told us that during Metal Gear's 35th anniversary. For Metal Gear's 35th anniversary, Konami told us they were working on it. That's the best Konami could come up with for Metal Gear's 35th anniversary. No new game, no new collection. I mean, they didn't even make a freaking an NFT collection on it. That's what everyone was expecting. Everyone was expecting Konami to release an NFT collection or something like that. Nope. The best we got was they told us they were working on bringing this back to digital storefronts. It was ridiculous. So far, I'm not seeing any problems. There is a problem that's prevalent on the non-development version, just Canary. I'm going to shoot that guard. I'm going to shoot that. Shoot him. Once back here, swap to stun grenades, throw a stun grenade, and that should take out all. Yeah, very nice Ocelot unit. Yes, there are two versions of Xenia, which is the Xbox 360, the emulator. I'm running this on. Going to play on series after. I might do. I'm running this on Xenia-Canary, which is basically the development build, in the same sort of manner as you throw a canary and you let a canary go into a mine ahead of you to make sure that it was breathable. They use Xenia-Canary as the sort of dev nightly. It's not nightly. It's the test build. They chuck everything into the test build to make sure that it works fine, and then eventually, when they're happy with all the testing, they go, right, here's the main build. There is a problem in the main build, which is the main reason why I'm using the Canary build, in that some water effects appear over the top of other objects. It's most prevalent in Dolinovina, which is where the rope bridge is, where you will see the river appear over the top of other objects. It looks really weird. It's not a problem that appears in Canary, as you can see. We've not seen anything. In fact, so far, I've not seen. The only untoward thing we've had so far in this run is the fact that the opening menu animation does not work. And that seems to be, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why. Sometimes it seems to work fine, sometimes it doesn't work at all, and this was one of the cases where it didn't work at all. But that is not imperative to gameplay, so that's not going to be a problem. But so far, and I had the same experience when I ran this a few weeks ago with the aforementioned problems with the achievements popping up and not having Xenia control its own frame rate was causing it. But the other thing that happened at the end, I tried to allude to this earlier, I got sidetracked, was when I got to the score screen at the very end of the game, the score screen suggested that my run had taken 15 hours when it had taken about an hour and 15 minutes. So that is something that I'm hoping was down to the fact that the gameplay was suddenly running at ridiculous speeds, but we'll see. Anyway, here's Ocelot. Shoot him in the back, throw that, turn around, back to the easy gun, shoot again, throw another stun grenade at him, turn around, aim its head, and fail to finish the fight.
That one taste.
And we'll finish the fight there instead. All right, into the cave. It is very dark in here. This is intended. Do not worry that you can't see anything. I can just about see. I'm at the. There we go. I was at the entrance to the hole. I think my angle was a bit awkward. So yeah, don't worry that you can't see properly here. You're not supposed to be able to see properly here. Looks so much nicer on a Series S and X. You can actually see. So yeah, apart from the timer issue at the end, my previous run, the game was pretty much flawless. You know, I didn't have any texture issues, I didn't have any frame rate issues, which is more than could be said for the PlayStation 3 version. Now, on my YouTube channel already, because I did a run at the same time as the previous one, I did a run of this on the on our PCS3, the PlayStation 3 emulator, and that had some problems. There were frame drops occasionally, particularly the bike chase still wasn't great. It was better than it's been before when I've tried this, but to be honest, it ran pretty much the same as a PlayStation 3 would. You know, as long as you're looking up in the air, you're fine. As long as you're not going into the 3D camera, you're fine. Anyway, here's the pane. Stun grenades. Not bad first phase. I didn't get any headshots in, which would have been nice. That was a headshot though. Not too bad. Not too bad for the pain there. I've had better. I've had worse. Anyway, where was I going? Where was I going with this? What was I talking about before the pain? I've forgotten. Oh, the PlayStation 3 version. So running this on a PS3 emulator had some issues. There were frame drops at bike chase, so you would pretty much have to play the bike chase as you would on a PlayStation 3, which is to say you look up in the air the entire time. If you're running this on very easy, you can do that. On higher difficulties, you do actually have to shoot and do stuff. On the Xbox Series S, you get a smooth 60 FPS at all times. That's kind of what I'm expecting here. Do not do that. There is a glitch there where you can go out of bounds. On the emulator, it seems to kill you. Don't do that. But it wasn't just the bike chase that had problems on our PCS3. There were a couple of little frame drops occasionally anyway. The main one that I noticed was going through the sewers. The reflection of Snake in the water was causing some frame drops as well. So here's hoping, you know, that didn't occur when I last did it on Xenia, so here's hoping it isn't going to on here. The main thing that I'm hoping works this time round is the frame rate doesn't like increase at all. It shouldn't do because I've correctly limited it this time. And also the end game timer does not suggest that I was playing this for, you know, 15 hours. Oh, that's fine. Actually shoot that. So swim over here. Oh, that doesn't usually happen. Let's get through here before those reinforcements come. The only other difference between the PS3 run that I've got up on my YouTube channel and this run is that PS3 run I was also practicing all keratin frogs, which is as you can probably guess, is a speed run where you complete the game whilst also grabbing all 64 keratin frogs. I'm only doing any percent for this because I don't need to practice keratin frogs at the moment. I need to practice any percent. So that's why I'm doing any percent. So as a result, this video will be a bit shorter. Not a huge amount shorter. Keratin frogs adds about 10 to 15 minutes, I think. Something like that. But whilst this is just a showcase of what the game runs on Xenia Emulator at the moment, part of my intention with it is to suggest that because it's stable, because the IGT seems accurate, electric bats, oh dear, this could potentially be used for speedrunning because, as I said earlier, this game is extremely inaccessible. And the main reason why this game does not have the number of speedrunners that it could have is because no one can freaking buy it. Even if even if you fork out the money to purchase an Xbox Series S, like I did, I wanted an Xbox Series S for other stuff, and I do play other stuff on it. I play Vampire Survivors on it. I've tried is it Wulong? Because that recently came out and that's on Game Pass. Like, I've got Game Pass. I get Game Pass through my phone contract, so it was a no-brainer getting a Series S. So rather than having to boot up my computer and all of that, I can just very quickly play them on an Xbox Series S. But 90% of the reason for getting my Xbox Series S was so that I could speedrun this. And not everyone has the money to just buy a console that's this expensive for this game. It's for just one game. And as I've said already, even if you did have the money to do that, you can't buy the game anyway. Because, Konami still haven't got their finger out and fixed it. Now, am I therefore saying that by getting the emulator, you could pirate the game? Well, piracy is always, piracy is always an issue. I own the digital version and I own a physical version of this game that I'm playing right now. I have the digital version on my Xbox Series S. Back when the HD collection was first released, I bought a physical copy on my for my 360. You probably can't see it in this camera angle, but it's on a shelf behind me. So I do genuinely own this game. Now one could say, it depends on where you lie on it, and I'm assuming, the law actually says no, you shouldn't be downloading any copy of it. If you want to play this legitimately on an emulator, what you should be doing is getting a retail version of the game and ripping it. I can tell you I did not do that. I downloaded a copy. However, I feel like, it's not a problem because I already own this game twice. Twice on this console alone already. That was fantastic. Fantastic fair fight. I own the digital version of the PS3 version, and I own 3 different copies of the game for PS2. So I kind of feel like I have paid my fair due to own a copy of Metal Gear Solid 3. Now, of course, there are other issues with piracy of all this. One could certainly argue that as Konami are not officially supporting it, you can't buy the game anywhere. Then piracy is completely legitimate. That is an argument that I could have sympathy with. I'm not going to say whether I agree with it or not, because I don't want anything coming out of this video. Not that anything would happen if I advocate for it or not, but one could certainly argue, and I would sympathize with the argument, that because this game is not available to purchase anywhere apart from an old, getting an old second-hand disc and playing it on a defunct console that no one plays anymore, because I don't actually. One thing I haven't thought of is because the game isn't available on the store. I don't know whether buying the disc version and playing it on an Xbox Series X will work, because from my recollection, the way the Xbox Series X disc versions of games work is that the disc just grants you access to download the digital version of the game. The disc is you then still have to use the disc, but the disc is only there for verification purposes. You're not actually running it from the disc, you're running the digital version with the disc essentially acting as a key to allow you to play it. So I don't. So with the digital version not available, I'm not even sure if you can. I don't know. I don't know if that method works. Nope. Oh, I'm so bad at that. I'm so bad at dodging that shot. Whoops. There we go. All right, we're set up now to keep going. Well, the same with Metal Gear Solid 2. I've got Sons of Liberty on PS2. I've got Substance on PS2. I've got the HD edition on PS3 digital. I've got the HD edition on Xbox 360 digital and a physical version. I've bought the GOG version on PC. I think that's it for MGS2. I don't own the Vita version. There you go. I don't own the Vita version of the HD collection. I've got the PS3 and the Xbox 360 version. I don't have the Vita version of the HD collection. Yeah, it's not. The MGS2 is not available on GOG. Konami need to get their finger out and deal with it. And, you know, as I say, until there comes a time where you can purchase this game and play it legitimately without jumping through hoops with, you know, buying secondhand copies and getting old consoles and shit like that, I have sympathy with the idea that you should be allowed to pirate this game. If piracy is the only legitimate means of playing a video game, then it should be allowed. I know a lot of people say the same about Nintendo games because Nintendo is so notoriously bad at this kind of thing. Like Nintendo Switch Online services. I remember when the announcement that you know, Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games were going to be available. People, oh yeah, this is amazing. Look, we can play these games and on a Switch, and it's great, and it's all like that. I was like, you know how big the Game Boy library is, and how slowly they are going to drip feed these games? It's not a win. That service is piss poor. If I recall correctly, because I tweeted about it at the time, if I recall correctly, there are around 3,000 games combined for Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. There's around 3,000, and I think on Nintendo Switch's online debut for that service, there's half a dozen. There's a dozen, or maybe 2 dozen. Somewhere between 10 and 20 games out of 3,000. That is not a good service. Plus, it's locked behind, you know, it's locked behind a subscription service. It's locked. I believe it's the advanced subscription service as well, isn't it? It's not just Nintendo Switch Online. It's Nintendo Switch Online Plus. You know, there's no. Oh, I knew that was coming. There's no opportunity to just, you know, buy these games, and, you know, you can't just pay for that individual service or buy the games yourself or anything like that. No, you have to have the whole Nintendo Switch Online Plus service. I could be wrong about it being the Plus service. Forgive me if I'm wrong on it being that, but for me it is not. It's not the amazing win that everyone was claiming it to be. Preservation is a problem. And I gotta say, Microsoft seem to be the ones doing the best at it. Not to say that they're perfect, but I would argue that Microsoft are probably the best at it at the moment. My God, Sony are by far the worst. This is a notoriously long cutscene and loading screen, but that loaded about the same amount of time it would take on an Xbox Series S. We still saw the Metal Gear Solid HD logo there, which was expected. I didn't need to get my cardboard box out there. Seeing that logo there is expected on a Series S. So already I can tell you that this does seem to run at the same speed as an Xbox Series S. I can't say that, 100% that is definitely fact, but that seems to be my experience with it so far. In the same way that the PS3 version running on RPCS3 seemed to run and load at the same speed as a PS3 with loading trick would. Because there are two different speeds for the PlayStation 3 version of the game, loading trick and non-loading trick. I'm not going to go into all the details of that because we're not playing the PS3 version, and that would just boggle the mind of some. It was a bit awkward, but I got there.
Are you ready for this?
He's gone this way. There he is. Ooh. There's a few. Oh, I was just a little too slow. There's a little bit of an animation, a little bit of a graphical glitch there. The sort of around the Fury and his flames, some weird artifacts appearing, but didn't interfere with the gameplay. That wouldn't, that clearly didn't be a problem. I guess it'd probably be worth going back and doing that fight and taking a little bit longer with it. Because that's the other thing, because I am just absolutely whizzing through this at a super pace, because I'm well practiced in this category of the speedrun, we're not seeing a lot of stuff that could also go wrong. I'm certainly not saying that if this is correct, if this run goes well and the IGT seems about right and stuff like that, then we should absolutely say yes, we should be allowing this for speedruns. We would need tests. You'd need to do a lot more tests. You'd want to run around more. You'd want to investigate more areas. You want to see what happens when things go wrong. I haven't died yet, for example. So yeah, you'd need to do a lot more testing to make sure there isn't anything else untoward. But for the purposes of this video, I just wanted to go through it quickly and show, it is possible that this is viable. Now, of course, the other elephant in the room when it comes to whether this is viable or not is the specs down there. Oh, I pushed that twice, apparently. I am running this. Oh, no, not scientist. Officer, please. You'd be glad to know, those who know about the cardboard box glitch. The box glide does work as it should do. Should be no reason it doesn't anyway. Whee! Yep. Anyway, I'll talk about specs and stuff in a minute, because we're about to come into the torture section, which is not a very nice section of the game. Sokolov is tortured by Volgin. Snake is then tortured by Volgin, and throughout the whole time, Snake has a bag over his head, so you can't see anything. It will be a black screen. You'll see the subtitles at the bottom. It's not very nice. If you don't like listening to it, then you might want to mute, or because I'm not going to mute the audio. I have no control or anything now. I just have to let this play out. This is exactly how it should look. It should be a black screen with all of this text. So anyway, the elephant in the room when it comes to specs, of course, is the specs that I'm showing down here. I am showing I have an Intel i7-13700KF CPU, and I have an Nvidia RTX 3070 Ti GPU. These are obviously very high spec components. The processor in particular is, you know, the latest Intel generation. It's not the best Intel processor. I could have got an i9, but that was a lot more expensive. I think there's probably a bit further up from that, but for the most part, you know, this is kind of current gen. Nvidia is obviously already onto the 4000 series of GPUs, but the 3070 Ti is certainly up there when it comes to, you know, the last generation and sort of that. So the main thing is I'm using a very good spec of computer to run this game. Now on my YouTube channel, and you should be able to find links, so I might link it down below. I do have a run of this that I did a couple of years ago, probably nearly 2 years old, that run, where I did this on my old computer, which was an Intel i7 8700K and an Nvidia GTX 970. Those are obviously a lot lower specs. It's only in the last 6 months that I've upgraded to what I've got now, which is why I'm jumping back on emulation now, because I've upgraded. And that run, for the most part, went very smoothly until the bike chase. Bike chase was pretty much unplayable. It was dropping to like less than 30 FPS. So whilst this run looks good, everything seems to be working, the FPS isn't dropping, I am running this on a very high spec. So it's very likely that we would need to test this on, you know, much lower specs to make sure, you know, and at some point we basically have to have some sort of cutoff that if this was going to be something that we would allow for speedrunning, there would have to be some sort of cutoff at some point that says, you know, if you are, unless you are able to consistently play at least 50 FPS, you can't do this run. Now, some would say, you know, that's a bit elitist. It's not very fair on people who haven't got high spec computers to do this, but my argument against that is, well, no one can do it at the moment. And if you're saying, well, we can't let anyone do it because the lowest spec people can't do it, then we never get anywhere. Oh, I went to roll way too. You're supposed to roll so that dog doesn't hit you. Had this problem a couple of times in Metal Gear speedrunning before, with people wanting certain things to work or not work because they didn't have good, you know, good enough spec to run emulation. Because emulators are allowed, even in silent, emulators are allowed for other games in the series. Most notably, most of the older games. Basically anything PlayStation 1 era or older, you are allowed to run on emulator. So Metal Gear 2, Snake's Revenge, you know, the MSX and NES games, you can run those on emulator. In fact, Metal Gear 1 and 2 are very special in that you're allowed to run them on a PlayStation 2 emulator, playing the versions of those games that appeared on Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence. I think you're allowed to run them on Xenia, on RPS3, because obviously this version of the game includes copies of those as well. Just no one chooses to because they're not as good as the PS2 version. Now, whilst you're allowed to run those games on the PS2 emulator, you are not allowed to run the actual PS2 games on the PS2 emulator. So you're not allowed to play Metal Gear Solid 2 or Metal Gear Solid 3 on a PlayStation 2 emulator because they're not accurate enough. Although I think that's probably something that should be looked into again. Water reflections on the floor here, no issue for the emulator. FPS has not dropped. For the sorrow here, we don't go all the way down to the end. We just make Snake drown and then use a revival pill. Again, underwater, no issues. Not seeing any on the PS3. Running the PS3 emulator, there's a little bit of chug here with water effects. The game didn't really seem to like water effects very much. So revive. So yeah, other games in the series you can. Metal Gear Solid 1 you can run on emulator. Metal Gear Solid the Twin Snakes you can run on emulator, and that's because Dolphin has proved over time to be a very, very good emulator. But I think that's Twin Snakes is probably the latest game in the series. Actually no, the Acid games on any of the PSP games you can run on PPSP because that emulator is very good. The save here. We'll probably see the loading screen here because that's quite a long load. Oh, I hadn't. Oh, I didn't actually. I can't remember if we see it on the Series S or not. No, maybe we don't. Anyway, yeah, you can run the Acid games, Portable Ops. I think you can run Peace Walker on an emulator, except no one chooses to do so because they play the HD version instead of the original PSP version for good reason. But that's about it. Metal Gear Solid Mobile, you'll have to play that on an emulator. Ghost Babel, Game Boy game, you can play that on an emulator. Okay, that should be everything. If this was allowed to be run on an emulator, I haven't got any Chucky Milk time. I've still got one carton left in the fridge. I've got Coke at the moment. If the decision was made to allow this emulator as a speedrun, then this would be the latest game in the series that would be allowing this. I've got one more carton. However, I do still have just milk and chocolate milk powder. But I bought those little cartons because I thought they'd be cool. I probably won't be buying those cartons again, because those cartons were the natural version of Nesquik, and yeah, the natural version's not as nice. It's like it's got no basically it's got no sugar in it, and doesn't taste quite as nice as a result. Going into the Volgin fight now. There's going to be big electrical effects in this fight. Will those cause any problems? Not that we really get much chance to see them. Oh, we will here. He's gonna. No problem. No problems. All right, bike chase. Bike chase is traditionally the thing that causes the most problems in this game. In every single version of Metal Gear Solid 3, the bike chase runs at a reduced frame rate because there is too much stuff going on. The exception is playing on an Xbox Series S or X, If you're playing on an Xbox Series S or X, you get a smooth, always 60 FPS experience. And so far, that seems to be what I'm getting here. But if you're playing the Xbox 360 version on an Xbox One or on an Xbox 360, you will get frame drops. If you're playing on a PS3, you will get frame drops. If you're playing on a PS2, even though the PS2 version is limited to 30 frames per second anyway, you will still get frame drops. For speedrunning purposes, I can't say much about the PS2 version because I haven't really touched the PS2 version of this. If you're doing the PS3 version, you will just, for very easy at the very least, you will just look straight up in the air, and that will stop you from having any FPS drop. You will just keep that out, and you just look up in the air for the entire time, except for points where you have to shoot, which for the most part in Bike Chase you don't have to shoot, but you just look straight up in the air. Yeah, smooth, as I say, smooth 60 FPS, no problem. Now, of course, this will vary depending on your CPU and GPU. And it is worth remembering that for emulation, your CPU is far more important than your GPU. Emulation is primarily done on software, it is not done on hardware. Your graphics card will make it look nicer. You know, it will add anti-aliasing, smooth out the edges, you know, might improve the coloring and stuff like that. But as far as the game actually running, that is all down to your CPU. Your CPU is what is controlling the game's logic and the way that the game runs. Yeah, I got Keratin Frog. So if you don't have a decent CPU, you will still struggle here. Even if, and I found this out the hard way. I got my, you know, wow, I've already killed them all. That section is not on rails. You do have to kill every guard there to move on. Now we're back on rails. I can do what I can look up in the air again. But it's good to shoot them. It's a bit more fun. I got my GPU, my RTX 3070 before my CPU. It's only been in the last month that I've upgraded my CPU and hard drive, CPU and motherboard. But about 6 months ago, I got my hard drive. Stop saying hard drive, Nick. About 6 months ago, I got my graphics card, and one of the things I did was I booted this up and thought, yeah, I've got a new graphics card. This, you know, emulation should work. Oh, there's a bit of a graphical error. I wonder if that appears anywhere else. We're not dropping frames. Yeah, just this one really weird triangle. That's weird. Yeah, that's a really weird looking triangle. No, I'm going to take this guard out. Come on. Come on. Get him. Yeah, there we go. Oh, no. No, I accidentally shot him. Is it still there? Yeah, it's still there. That's weird. Anything coming up? How good of a CPU, GPU do you need to have this game played at 60 FPS the whole time? That's the question I can't answer, because I've only tested this on 2. And an i7-13700K will cause problems. An i7-13700K will run beautifully, and that's the thing that needs to be tested. Where is the threshold, and how does it affect the in-game time as well? Is the other important thing. Is that yeah, that strip's still there. That's weird. How does it affect the IGT now? To the best of our knowledge, or certainly with the console version, FPS shouldn't affect time. At least for the console versions. On the console versions of the game, if you drop frames, it will not cause you any time loss. Why did you hit me then? I'm still shooting you. Not quite sure why you went for me there. I've shot him enough. I've shot him enough. Yeah, no frame drops throughout all of that explosions and stuff like that.
I planted one C3 charge. The Shagohod's not here yet. Keep your aim steady.
So that's the thing that would have to be tested. And as I was trying to say, the point with it is
Keep your aim steady.
the in-game time should continue at the correct pace, even if you drop frames. It's why the PS3 version is a problem. Why we look up in the air during the bike section, because all of those lost frames are you're losing time. Perfect shot for the loop. I'm just going to concentrate for a second, so I try and get this loop. Got it, as long as I get this last shot. Beautiful. That's the second half that I've been struggling with a little bit lately. Beautiful. Absolutely spot on Shagohod there. Could not be happy with that. All right. So we actually have some frame drops there. We are no longer running at 60 FPS. I think that was down to how many units were on screen. And actually, it's something I found with the PS3 version of the emulator. Was that it tended to be the bikes chasing you that caused the frame drops, not like the environment and stuff like that. But yeah, you can see here we're actually dropping down to about 50, 58, 57. So it's still not flawless, but it was by no means not playable. When it drops down to like less than 40, that's when you've got a problem. And again here, actually, I'm getting the same. It is dropping some frames here. It's probably partly the bikes, but also the rain and stuff like that. So you do still have to be a little bit careful. But like I said, any frame loss, we are losing time, or we should, if we're on a console, losing time, because the time is constant. It's not linked to frame rate. That's not the same for other games in the series. For example, the Twin Snakes, when played on an emulator, the in-game time is directly tied to frame rates. If you drop frames, the in-game time will slow down with you. Vermilion, who's in the chat, knows exactly how that feels. When we had a tournament a couple of years ago, was it? It was nearly a couple of years ago, actually. Yeah, I wanted to practice shooting that frog without shooting any guards. Where he raced against House tests. House was running on a laptop and did have some frame rate issues, and finished a good like minute or so behind Vermilion, but their IGTs were identical and they had a draw. And that was because House dropped a load of frames, slowing him down, but the IGT was, slowed down with it. Now, we don't know whether that same thing will happen in this. It would need to be tested. I'm not sure the best way of testing it, but it would need to be tested. The alternative for that is if people accept, okay, the IGT doesn't work in this, but the emulation seems smooth enough and it seems reliable enough to actually work, is we could drop the IGT and time it in real time instead. That is not out of the ordinary for Metal Gear either. Metal Gear MSX, the original Metal Gear, usually ran on a PS2 emulator, as I talked about earlier. That has an IGT, but for the main speedrun, it is actually timed in real time, because the IGT, the main reason for that isn't because there's a problem with the IGT in emulation. The reason for that is because if you take a death in the game, your IGT is reverted back to where you continue from. So if you hit a save point and then 10 seconds later you die, when you reload, your IGT will have dropped back 10 seconds to what the time was when you loaded, which isn't great for speedrunning purposes, because it basically means that death is not a punishment. Excuse me. Death is a retry. Death allows you a do-over, which is not good for speedrunning. In speedrunning, death should be a time loss. But if it turns out that, you know, frame drops do not massively impact the IGT or the time, you know, and you know, the proviso is that as long as you have a reasonably steady frame rate throughout, you know, as long as for the most part you can hit 60 frames per second, then I think this should, you know, it should be it would work. You know, you have to get to a point where if you're running Bike Chase and you're doing 20 frames per second, at that point we have to say, sorry, you can't do this. And that sounds harsh and sounds elitist, but at the same time, that works with any other emulator. You know, we allow Twin Snakes to be ran on Dolphin, but if you can't run Dolphin on your, you know, on your really shitty laptop, then you can't speedrun it. There has to be a lower ceiling at some point. The question with this is how high is that ceiling? If it is so high that literally you need this processor that I've got, my nearly 400 pound processor that I spent to get this, you need that to run it, and anything less than this is not good enough, then no. It is not going to be worth having this, because only a very, very select few people will be able to speedrun it, and that's not worth it. But if we can, you know, if we can say, you know, as long as you've got as long as you've got at least a 1060 GTX, because well, no, not a 1060. That's GPU, which established GPU doesn't make that much difference. You know, as long as you've got a processor that was made in the last, you know, 5 years, you know, you give a benchmark for both Intel and AMD. You know, it says, because the 13700KF is the 13th generation of Intel. I can't remember what my 8700K was. I can't remember which generation that was, but that clearly wasn't enough. But I bought that like over 10 years ago. So, you know, you probably say something along the lines of, you know, as long as you've got at least 8th generation Intel or whatever the equivalent AMD is. You know, I don't know. I don't do AMD. I do Intel and Nvidia. You know, then you can run it as long as there's a decent threshold. Then I don't see why not. It will be a more harsh threshold than, you know, say running Dolphin and running Twin Snakes, but you know, at what point do we have to say? At what point do we, you know, we're already limiting it by not allowing it in the first place. You know, at that point it becomes, you know, similar to, well, you want to run, because at the moment the current threshold for running Metal Gear Solid 3 is you need to own a console and you need to own a copy of the game, and neither of those things are very easy to do right now. Certainly if you want to run this version of the game, it's a bit easier for PS2 because, you know, there are so many people out there that have PS2s. You can pick up a PS2 relatively cheap. You can grab a copy of MGS3 relatively cheap. The main issue with PS2, of course, is capturing it. Capturing a PS2 is not overly fantastic. If you want it to look really nice, you do need, you know, really good tech. which I don't have. I just have a capture card, and that's it. I do not have a RetroTink or an OSCT or anything like that. So when I run console games, except the Series X because it looks really nice, but when I run, you know, PS2, Wii, because I do, I run Twin Snakes on the Wii, you know, they don't look great. There are already plenty of limitations for things, so adding another limitation, adding another limitation so that some people can do something, I don't see a problem with, as long as there is a decent amount of people that can actually do it. Anyway, we're coming up to the final boss. This is the boss.
Let's see what you're made of.
Parry her. Give her a slam.
Excellent, Jack.
Throw a stun grenade up in the air. Turn around. She's on the floor. Shoot her with the easy gun.
You're better than I remember.
That's better. She's not on the floor now.
Time
Ooh. Oh yeah, you shouldn't try and grab her from the front like that.
nothing to show for it.
There we go. Carry on with the loop now. Slam. And done. So this cutscene is unskippable. We'll shoot the boss at the end. We will be going all the way to the end of the credits, as I will be putting this on YouTube. If you're you're watching the VOD on YouTube now, hopefully. I will be muting the music during the credits because that can cause copyright issues. I don't want to run the risk of this video ever being taken down. But we need to get through all of the credits in order to see the game time at the end to see what that looks like, because that's very important. But you know, apart from at the very start of the bike chase after the Shagohod fight, no FPS drop, and that FPS drop was very liminal. I think the lowest it dropped to might have been 53. I mean, now we're getting some drops again,
Or should I say,
but that's not gonna cause a huge time loss.
wonderful.
It's certainly not unplayable.
Kill me. Kill me now. Do it. There's only room for one boss and one snake.
It's weird that I've now actually dropped down into the 40s. Although that might be because it's a cutscene. Some of the cutscenes might natively run at different speeds. So I wouldn't worry about that. That's that bit done. There is one more codec and then a save. It's the save. The final cutscenes. So here's where I'm going to mute the audio. So yes, we now have no audio throughout. But I can confirm the song is playing correctly as it should do. We would not be allowed to speed up emulation at this point. That's something we're allowed to do in other games in the series because we know the IGT is already finished. We can't do that here because the IGT is still running. But also, I don't think you can even do it in Xenia, not without causing some problems. But yeah, regardless, you can't. You wouldn't do it in a speedrun anyway because the IGT is still ticking. I believe it's one of the only games in the series where the IGT does still tick throughout the credits. Oh. Yeah, I gotta say, you know, certainly for my system with my specs, that is perfectly fine for speedrunning. Quite how it measures up against an actual run time wise, loading times, that would have to be checked. You'd have to have 2 runs that were relatively side by side and see. Now the IGT of the game on console is actually very, very accurate. The only time where there's no IGT running is during the sorrow. The IGT actually pauses during the sorrow section. So if this were to match properly, we should see. And looking at OBS, I've been recording for 1 hour, 4 minutes and 35 seconds. So, you know, now there's a bit of preamble at the start, so you can cut off a minute or so for that. Considering my performance in that and how much, considering my performance and what happened in that, I would actually suggest that would probably be a PB. There was actually, I not really thought about it, but that was actually a very, very good run. I can't remember my current PB in the game, which I only got the other week. I do have a sub 110. Yeah, I gotta say, now that I think about it, I'm kind of disappointed that this is an emulator run and not a proper console run, because I think this would probably be a PB because it was very good. My current PB is 1 hour, 8 minutes and 47 seconds. I would suggest the IGT for this shouldn't be too dissimilar to that. So I think this should be lower than that. But to answer Young Mason in the chat there, it ran very well. No, the only major time where I saw a frame drop was at the start of the chase after fighting the Shagohod. Just a combination of all of the different bike units and the rain and the open atmosphere and stuff like that did cause it to drop down. But I think the lowest it dropped was maybe 53. Not a problem. As soon as I'd shot the bikes, straight back up to 60. So if you wanted to play it super safe, you just do what you do on PS3, which is look up in the air. But, you know, it's not going to cause major time loss. But also, we don't know yet how the emulator type, the IGT, works in this. So we'll have to see. But for me, knowing how well that run went and everything about it, I would suggest that this should be a low 108, I would think. But yeah, that was. I'm trying to think if any the Fury. I lost a little bit of time on the Fury. I lost a slight bit of time on the boss. There's a couple of little time losses, but for the most part, that went really, really well. So I'm not. Vermilion says that's a 107. Vermilion is the current world record holder, so he would know how run should feel, and he reckons that should be a 107. So this will certainly be a test of what the IGT in the emulator looks like. If it is somewhere around 107, 108, then we're golden. It works. If we're at 15 hours, like I had the last time I tried this, then we got a big problem. Well, the Way to Fall has finished, and we're now on to the Metal Gear Solid 2 theme. Just so that you know where I'm at with the credits and the music. It sounds lovely. I wish you could hear it. Yeah, if you are interested in seeing other emulator runs, I am planning on doing loads more. I want to tackle Metal Gear Solid 4 on our PS3. I already have this run on our PCS3 available on YouTube. I want to look at Metal Gear Solid 2 on both. I might look at Peace Walker, but I'm not a huge Peace Walker fan, so maybe not. I could certainly have a look at Rising. Not that there's any point, because Rising is there's not really much point in doing things like Rising, Ground Zeroes, Phantom Pain, because they're already available on PC. I don't really see the point in playing in testing emulators for games that we already have natively on PC. MGS2 is an exception because the MGS2 the PC version of MGS2 is based on the Xbox, the original Xbox version, whereas the HD edition is a different version of the game. So that's still worth having a look at. All right, that's the end of the credit music. So I'll bring the sound back up for Ocelot to have his chat.
Yes, Grozny Grad and the Granin Research Facility have both been wiped out without a trace.
But yeah, so check out the channel. You know, subscribe if you want to see more. Particularly Metal Gear. I might do some other games, but yes, Metal Gear is obviously my main priority with this. If you want to just see normal speedruns, I've got those as well.
Khrushchev is finished.
If you're interested in running this game yourself, I will post links down below to where you can grab the version of Xenia-Canary that I was using. I will also post my settings file because I have tweaked some of the settings, such as turning off achievements, limiting the frame rate to only 60 FPS, and there's a couple of other settings in there that were important for this run as well. So go and have a look at those if you want to run this game yourself on Xenia Emulator and test it. And if you do, then please come back to this video, go to the comments and say, I tried this, I used your settings, I used the same version of Canary, here are my specs, and this was my experience with it. And the more that we can get people testing this and showing what their experience with different specs, you know, it'd be great to see someone with an AMD graphics card and CPU do this and stuff like that. So the more that we can get that, the more we get an idea. So, you know, definitely do that. The one thing that I won't do, which I did have someone ask me on another video, was where did I get a copy of the game from? I am not going to give you links to piracy sites to download your copy of Metal Gear Solid 3.
Only half the money is made back.
Obviously, the official way of doing it is to get a retail version of the game and rip the files yourself. I'll be openly honest, I didn't do that.
Yes, the
but
weapon has been reduced
as I've alluded to already, I own 3 different copies of this game.
That's right. Grozny
plus all the PS2 copies that I own. So it's pedantic at that point.
That was the boss's work too.
I've always hated the idea that you should never download a copy of it because you should be ripping your own version. But if I rip my own version, it's so different from the fact that I've got this version. It doesn't make a difference. For me, there's still there's still a little bit of it was I will download a copy of it, but I do own it, so for me that feels right.
Yes, they bought our story.
Now, whether you download it and you don't own a copy of it, that's completely up to you, but I'm not going to share links. is the point that I was trying to make there.
As well. And the Soviets still haven't discovered my true identity.
I mean, alternatively, Konami could get their finger out and actually release it again so that you can play it. They could port it to PC so we don't even need to worry about emulation. But Konami won't do it because Konami.
No one knew that
Konami are the worst. It's the great James Stephanie Serling once said.
I'm always at the CIA's disposal,
Mr. Director. All right, let's see it. What is the time? Please don't say 15 hours again. 1:09:04. That is interesting. That's very interesting. That is a lot slower. It's around the right time. Let's put it out there straight away that is about around the time that we'd be looking at here. My recording at this point has been going for 1 hour 13 minutes and 4 seconds. So what I need to do, and obviously I can't do this now, is I'll do it and I'll put it in the description. What I will do is I will actually see, because we know the IGT officially starts when the opening script, after the Cold War, after the end of World War II, the world was split into two, East and West, this beginning of the era called the Cold War. When that text disappears, that's when the IGT starts. The IGT stops when this screen appears, and the IGT pauses throughout the Sorrow gameplay. So what I could then do is go back and actually see how much time passed in between all of those and see. The other thing to do would be to do the run again and see what time I get and things like that. But, you know, knowing what I've done in the past, Vermilion's advice, you know, Vermilion's the world record holder. He's also you're a verifier for this game as well, aren't you? Vermilion is one of the moderators on speedrun.com. You know, Vermilion is a very, very good source of knowing what kind of time to expect from a run. So the fact that Vermilion was expecting this to be a 107 and it's a 109.04 means that it's very likely that this is slow for some reason. The main thing is it doesn't say 15 hours. Like it did last time. So that's good. And if it means that this IGT is, you know, if this IGT is consistent but doesn't match up with console, then that's fine. We just have emulator as its own category anyway. That tends to be the norm across. It's actually very rare. I can't think of the PSP games maybe. But most of the time, emulator and console are separated anyway, so it would not be untoward to have the two separated. There definitely are some games where emulator and console can go hand in hand. This should almost certainly not be one of them. You're looking at emulators that are so damn accurate. You know, NES, Genesis, not even PS1 is accurate enough for it. But that's certainly promising. That's certainly very promising. I'd love to see this done on different specs. I may try, now that it's been quite a few years since I last did it, the specs of my old computer that I was talking about, I gave all of that equipment to my wife. Her computer now has my old i7-13700K and my old GTX 970 Ti in it. So maybe it'd be worth me jumping on her computer, doing this run again and seeing how it's improved, because I did use those specs last time I did this, but that was about 4 years ago, I think. So, you know, the emulators certainly come a long way, but, you know, for me, I'm pleased with that. It's a lot better than running it on our PCS3. It's much better than the PS3 version. I will tell you that. Certainly. So thank you very much for watching. I say, please check out the description below for link to my settings and to where you can grab this version of Xenia-Canary. Obviously, they are updating it still. It's still ongoing. This is the version from March 8th. Today is March 25th. There hasn't been a new version since then. But, you know, hopefully we can see more and more that it improves, and so we'll have to see what that time is. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Go check out some other videos. Subscribe if you like what you've seen, and you can check me out live at twitch.tv/NickRPGreen every Tuesday and Thursday, occasionally at weekends like I am right now. Yeah, thank you very much.